Hello, I'm Lauren Bowden. Today I'm going to talk about a few things that have happened to me in the last couple of months that I'm hoping maybe might help somebody or just give somebody a bit of comfort if you're expecting a baby or you've just had a baby. These are very strange times, but also, or I should say, at the time I'm filming this, there is a global pandemic going on. But also, I wanted to talk about my breastfeeding journey, to which I've ended up exclusively pumping. But what I'm hoping is, even if the kind of the story I'm about to tell about my experience within a hospital and giving birth in a hospital that is facing a global pandemic, I'm just hoping that perhaps my kind of tale as to what has happened to me having a baby during this whole sort of global situation. If somebody else stumbles upon this, it might kind of help them feel a bit more prepared, or it might calm them down, or make things worse. Who knows? But I also wanted to talk about my journey with breastfeeding, because the two are kind of linked at the moment. So at the moment I am exclusively pumping, and that is kind of a result of many things to do with myself, my baby, but also we can't say what this illness is called at the moment on YouTube. Hi, Editing Lauren here. Just thought I'd better jump in and say there are certain words you can't say on YouTube, and at the moment what's going on right now is kind of one of them. So I'm just going to call it the beer illness, but you know what I'm talking about. Okay, so I guess I should start by kind of explaining about my baby. I had my daughter, who's called Beatrix, B for short. I had her on the 10th of April, and that was probably 2 weeks, I think about 2 weeks into lockdown. This whole thing kind of has its sort of good points, in that my husband was furloughed kind of straight away as soon as they said that you couldn't work, or if you couldn't go to work, and it. See, I'm explaining this as well as Boris did. But basically, if you couldn't work in an environment where you couldn't socially distance, then you couldn't work. So he was furloughed, and that meant that he was home. So, in sort of my last few days when I was like really heavily pregnant, I had him home, which was great, and I've had him home ever since. It is great having him around, but at the same time it's also really scary because I don't know if he's going to have a job to go back to. We work in manufacturing, and crystal is what we make, glass, crystal. I don't know if there's going to be a demand out there for, £100 decanters when all this is over. So, that's quite scary. And I'm sure it is for many other people out there. So the way that Bee's birth story began was I had a routine midwife appointment. I can't remember what the date was. I guess it was, it was on the 8th. It was on the 8th of April. I was 4 days overdue at that point, and during that appointment the midwife took my blood pressure and she noticed that it had gotten really high. She rang the doctor, and basically they said you need to go into hospital because it's kind of dangerously high and we need to be able to monitor you just to be on the safe side. So I then had to make the journey to the hospital and pack an overnight bag. At that point it was literally just to have my blood pressure monitored. That was it. So I kind of got there. I was really scared because obviously the hospital is kind of the last place you want to be during all of this. So I kind of got settled in my bed. They brought me some dinner, and I just kind of picked at it and knew that I wasn't really going to be sleeping very much because how can you relax? Everybody's distancing themselves from each other. Everybody's wearing like, you know, masks and all the protection stuff. With the same, I actually knew somebody who, I used to work with her, and I knew that she'd gone on to be a midwife and actually work in the hospital that I was in. With the same, she came around the corner, and I can tell you now, I've never been so pleased to see her in my life. It was just like seeing a familiar face, you know, like having a visitor. And it was just so lovely, you know. You know, she just came in my little cubicle and was like, "Oh my God, you know, I can't believe you're here. What's going on?" And I explained about my blood pressure, and she said, "Well, I'll tell you what. Whilst you're here, let's kind of make the most of the time that you have with everybody. Have you thought about gathering your colostrum?" So she handed me like a little pack that had little colostrum syringes. I think they're syringes, I guess. In like a little bag, and she said, you know, perhaps gather some of this and we can freeze it for you. Okay, that seems like quite a good idea. I knew I had colostrum. I'd been seeing it the last few days, so I knew that something was happening. So I had every intention of collecting colostrum, but by about 12:30 my waters broke. So this was totally random, you know. I was only supposed to be in there to have my blood pressure monitored. So when it broke, I called in the midwife, and she was like, you know, "Oh right, okay, so this is happening now." And then by about 5 o'clock, you know, I'd had contractions from sort of 12 until about 5, and I kind of knew that they were beginning to get closer together. By about 5 o'clock, they checked, and I was about 5 centimetres dilated. And I was really fortunate in my I'm not really sure what to call this time. We're just going to call it the illness. In my illness experience, I'd spoken to women before I had B that weren't even allowed their partner at the birth. We weren't allowed any visitors in the hospital. We knew that. That's the same pretty much everywhere, I think. I was really scared I wasn't going to be able to have Brian with me, my husband. But luckily, you know, the midwife said, you know, it's probably time you phoned your husband, and he got to me about probably, it was about sort of 7 in the morning, and I was so happy to see him, and I was so grateful that he was able to be there. Now, this is really mixed across the country. I've heard such differing experiences, but some people are allowed their partners there kind of for an unlimited time. Some people aren't even allowed their birth partner with them. And in my case, I was told beforehand that you could have your birth partner there, but they had to leave 2 hours after the birth of the baby. But a lot happened to me when I gave birth. And I can do another video about that. I'm happy to talk about that if people want to hear that. But just for the sake of keeping this concise, a lot happened, and Brian ended up staying. She was born 2:30 in the morning, and he didn't leave until I think it was about 8 or 9 in the morning. So that was really, really lovely to have him there and him spend some time with B before he had to go back home. So I hadn't gathered any colostrum like I'd planned to. No big deal. A lady there showed me how to express myself. She helped me express some myself. We fed that to B, and that was kind of her first feed. Then when we went upstairs to the ward and Brian had gone, me and another lady worked together on latch, and immediately we were kind of noticing problems. B had started to draw in her bottom lip, so it meant that when she latched, whenever she sucked, she was drawing in her lip, and it just meant that she kept coming off the breast. But we kind of persevered with it and hoped it would go away, and it didn't, but we did have a few moments where it seemed like she was latching okay. And, the midwife seemed quite happy with that, but when you're on the ward at the moment, they're kind of understandably quite keen to not have too many people in the ward if they don't need to be. So if you're fine, you're going home, because that means you're just keeping everybody safer, everybody can distance a bit easier, and it's just safer. So they agreed that my blood pressure had kind of started to regulate itself. I had had a lot of medication, and so I know now that that's why it did regulate itself. And again, if you want to hear more about the birth, I can explain that, but I won't go into that now. So because everything returned to normal, they were happy with B, they'd done all her checks, they decided to send me home. We got home and things just kind of got worse. So the latch just wasn't really working out. So I was expressing myself and gathering the colostrum in syringes still, and then feeding that to B like that. And that kind of worked, and I knew that I had a community midwife coming to see me the next day anyway, because at that time you were still allowed your next day visit as normal, but obviously they would be in protective clothing. So that community midwife showed up, and she has been an absolute star in all of this. Like, I could not have coped without that midwife. Yeah, she was absolutely fantastic, and she kind of noticed when she was watching me feed B that she was kind of drawing in her lip. And I think there's a lot to be said for, like, I've got big boobs, and I don't think that's really helped me and B. I think the concoction of kind of her with the lip thing she was doing and me kind of feeling like I'm suffocating her all the time, I think I was getting too precious and sort of manhandling her a bit too much, because they say, not to put your hand in behind their neck, and I was doing that a lot because I was just so afraid I was crushing her with my boob. We tried quite a few things, and the midwife could see I was struggling, and she said, "It's okay, look, I know a lady, she's a specialist, perhaps she could come and see you tomorrow if she's comfortable with it." Thankfully she did. She was a lovely, lovely lady, and immediately, she could see what I was talking about, and we tried, like, the rugby position, and we had a few successful latches, and that was great. I kind of thought, things are going better, and I thought things were going to work out. Then she took my blood pressure on my midwife's orders, because the previous day she'd noticed that it had started to climb again slightly. So that midwife then, the breastfeeding specialist took my blood pressure, and it had gone really, really high again, like really, really, really high. So they decided, once she'd spoken to a doctor on the phone, that I had to go back into hospital. And it was absolutely devastating, because I didn't know how long I was going to be in there. I was afraid to be there, but obviously, what's better for me and the baby is that we're both healthy. So, off I went, and I kind of arrived, and I thought, okay, well, we can make the most of this situation. I've got an abundance of midwives around, we can try and get this latch thing down. But that didn't really work out. Because of my blood pressure, I was being monitored, and that meant I was being tested every 2 hours. So I was having my blood pressure checked, they were giving me different medication, then seeing how that worked. They were drawing blood, and then they'd come back in, and the whole cycle would go again. I was also trying to feed B every 2 hours. This went on for 3 days. It was exhausting. I hadn't really slept from the birth even. I hadn't had, sort of uninterrupted sleep for 5 days now. And what I mean by that is, I know, yeah, I've got a newborn, don't expect sleep. I know that. But this was like I was sleeping for half an hour, then being woken up, sleeping for half an hour, then being woken up. It was absolutely draining, and there was no way I could have any help, because obviously no visitors. Brian couldn't be there. The midwives, I had this just overwhelming concern that I didn't really want them holding B for 2 reasons. The main reasons that I didn't want anything to happen to B, but also I didn't want anything to happen to them. They're just trying to do their job, and it was really conflicting. It was the hardest 4 days of, it was the hardest 3 days of my life. By the 4th day, I kind of had a bit of a breakdown, and I'm gonna keep this bit short because I get upset talking about it, and that's not what you want to see. I decided at about 3 o'clock in the morning that, it was the 3rd evening then, that I'd had enough, and I you know, they told me that I was going to be in another day. And yeah, I had like a massive breakdown to one of the midwives, and she said, is there anything we can do? You know, we can take you off your hands for a few hours and let you sleep. And I was just like, I can't do it. And I decided that it was safer to have Brian come to the hospital and take me away. And that was horrible. But I can honestly say that that was absolutely the right thing to do, no matter how anybody wants to judge that. And I did face a bit of judgment from one particular midwife, which didn't make me feel any better. But it was the right thing to do. I was done. I was so tired, absolutely exhausted. I wasn't very well. B was fine. You know, she's a good girl. You know, she was absolutely fine. And Brian missed her and wasn't spending any time with her, and I was feeling guilty about that. It was just horrible. And I decided that to try and get my blood pressure down and alleviate some of the stress that was making it go even higher, the right thing to do was to send her home with Brian. Now, luckily, I was only in another, I think it was about 9 hours or something, so I wasn't even away from her that long. But it could have been way worse, and to be fair, the midwife that was concerned was just worried that because the rule is once you left the building, you could not come back in unless you were readmitted for, you know, an illness. So it meant that if B went away, she could not come back in, and I could be separated from her for however long. Luckily, that didn't happen. So obviously I knew that Brian needed to feed B, and I didn't want to give up on breastfeeding yet. So what I decided to do was, on the suggestion of a midwife, was to pump some milk. And I did that. I pumped as much milk as I could to send him away with. And what we decided to do is express and bottle feed. And, you know, that was the plan, you know, and it worked perfectly because it was only a short amount of time anyway. So during that time, me and the midwives had kind of not really got anywhere with breastfeeding. We'd had a few successful latches, but nothing that special. And because I was being tested so much, it wasn't the time. So I've been using an electric pump to express milk there. When I was eventually discharged, when I came home, my husband had sterilised my manual pump for me because he knew that that's what I'd been doing in hospital, but just with an electric pump. So when I got home, I was like, oh great, you know, I'm stuck with this manual pump. This is going to be really hard now. But actually it was a lot quicker for some reason. And it worked really well for like a couple of weeks. That's how I fed B. I just pumped and pumped and pumped with the manual, and, you know, got lots and lots of milk. I've never had any trouble with milk supply, which is, touch wood, it's been fantastic. But I have carpal tunnel in this hand, and I had that, it was like a pregnancy related thing. And obviously pumping, it just wasn't working out anymore. And I started to get really stressed out with it. And also, like, if there was any water inside the pump, it would all sort of start to come apart, and it was horrible. Trying to sort of do that every 3 hours is really tough. And, you know, the thing is I didn't even realise that you could kind of exclusively pump. I didn't realise that was a thing until I sort of looked it up on YouTube. And I realised, oh wait, hang on a minute, most women are using electric pumps. I didn't even realise that you could kind of buy smaller ones at home. I know that sounds really ridiculous, but yeah, I didn't really think about it until I kind of needed something to help me. I, at this point, I'd kind of given up on breastfeeding. I'd ordered breast shields as well and tried that. Had a few successful moments with that, but still we were kind of just finding it really hard to gel with one another. And I think with everything going on, this is why I say it's kind of affected my breastfeeding journey. The illness has affected my breastfeeding journey because you can't have the same help that you would normally have. I can't go to groups. I can't have people around my house. I had those 2 people and that was it. You know, I was really lucky to have that. But, you know, it's really not the same. And as it would be for somebody who isn't experiencing what it's like to have a newborn during this time. I'd kind of reached a point where I'd just had enough with this friggin' manual pump. I'd even bought two so I could have one in the sterilizer and one on the go, and you know, so I kind of wasn't like trying to rush around. You know, it's hard if you're doing it every 3 hours. It's probably, I would say it's the hardest way to feed your baby, and you know, breastfeeding mums might laugh at me there, but you know, if you're breastfeeding, you can whip your boob out and it's kind of sorted out. You've not got to sterilise bottles and all that stuff. If you give them formula, you just have bottles, and yeah, you've still got to sterilise them. I have to do both processes. I'm pumping to make her food in the first place, plus I've got to sterilise all the bottles and everything else that comes with it. So, you know, it's been hard. It's been really hard. Luckily, I found a lovely lady locally in the area who I could collect a hired electric pump from, and that's what I'm still using now. Yeah, so it was kind of like, you know, if you leave the deposit money on the top of my fence, I'll put the pump there, you know, kind of standing away from each other like it's a bomb. Yeah, so, you know, really, really lovely lady. That has made expressing so much easier for me. I've also changed my routine. I'm probably going to do a video down the line about my breast pumping routine, because it has changed quite a lot and it might help somebody, even if it's not technically maybe the right thing to do, I don't know. But it's working for me. I've not had any problems, and, you know, I think it maybe could be helpful to somebody. In terms of down the line, what I'm hoping to do with feeding B, I don't know. I'm just kind of going with it and seeing how I get on. I'm not having any trouble with milk supply, touch wood. I really, 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 really want to give my baby breast milk for as long as I possibly can. Breastfeeding is kind of gone for us, like actual on the boob breastfeeding, just because I've tried, you know, in the last few weeks. And unfortunately, she's had, you know, she's had bottle-fed breast milk for a long time. With, I should say, there have been times where I haven't made quite enough milk for her to have extras. So I've always made sure she's got 120 ml for each feed in these weeks that she needs. Obviously, it was less in the beginning. But when she's wanted like a bit more as a top-up in between, I haven't always made that much milk. So then we've used a bit of like ready-made formula. But that's not been too often. But my dream was to breastfeed my child. That didn't work out. So expressing has been fantastic for me in order to do that. And if I can do it for as long as I possibly can, and milk supply is still good, touch wood, it still will be, then I will do that for her. But yeah, I'm just kind of riding with it. If I have to go to formula, I have to go to formula. Fed is best, and I don't want anybody to kind of judge anyone for their journey, especially not now. It's so hard anyway, let alone during this. You know, us mothers, like, we have missed out on so much, no matter how positive I try and be about it. You know, and there are positives, as I say, you know, you've not got visitors coming and going all the time, because you can't. So, you know, I've got Brian home, we've got that one-on-one connection, both of us. He's here to help, which is absolutely fantastic, and we are very much a team. I say help, we are together in this at the moment until he's back at work. But, you know, we've missed out on a lot, you know, or should I say Bee's missed out on a lot. She's not met any of our family, none of my friends. The girls I was talking about in the antenatal group, we've not been able to see each other and meet each other's babies, which would have been absolutely amazing. And we will do that, obviously, when things are different, you know. And I know I could kind of meet with them and socially distance, you know, 2 meters. But my mum is high risk, and that finishes on the 13th of June. Or the letter from the doctor says that she needs to isolate until the 13th of June. And I'm kind of hoping, if I'm really careful for the next few weeks, at least when that date comes, provided it's not extended, I can go and see her and she can finally meet my child. And my dad as well, obviously, but it's particularly hard for my mum, I think. I don't know though, it's probably awful for both of them. It's awful for me for both of them. So that's kind of where we're at right now, and you know, we'll see what happens in the future. You know, I don't know when all this is going to blow over. Could be a while yet, but we'll see. And I just hope that this has kind of, I don't know, helped somebody in some way. And like, I'm just kind of putting this out there to seek a bit more discussion as well, because all we have is this at the moment. It's just like virtual chatter, and I think it's really good for you. I think it really helps. So, you know, if you want to leave a comment below about your experience, I would really love to hear that. Or just, you know, in general, if you're exclusively pumping, I'd love to hear how you've gotten on, any tips you've got. And as I say, I'm happy to make more as things unfold. So yeah, I'm gonna go now because Brian has B and I can hear her crying downstairs. That's it from me today, and like I say, if you could like this video, it'd really help me out. Please leave a comment and please consider subscribing if you're interested in more videos like this. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.